Is that my water? Sick. That's mine.
mine.
I'll take that. It's okay, Stuart. I'll take it. You're so dumb.
You're so nice to me.
All right, I'll take the jug.
No. Here you go.
But I'll drink from the jug.
No.
You'll drink too much, Jesus. Oh, yo, this fool is fucking shilling his shit. I'll put it over here. All right, so our opinions, analysis, and review of 300.
Mm-hmm.
I think the best place to start with is the end, which is actually the beginning.
Right.
Which really puts the entire film in context. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I think it was such an important thing for him to put that at the beginning as well as the end to like book it. You know what I mean?
To book, yeah.
Instead of just like a throw on at the end. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. It frames the film.
It frames the film, and it always feels framed. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
It's not like, the narrator all along was at the end of the movie. You know what I mean? It's something that it consciously starts at the beginning and flows through. So as you're seeing what you're seeing, you are always taking that in with that perspective. So it's not like a recontextualization at the end of the movie. As you witness the movie, you have this understanding that this is a heightened, very propagandistic version of events through the eyes of one of the soldiers. You don't know who it is, to be fair, but you know it's one of them. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure.
And that informs a lot of the moments where they're like, and they're beasts, and you see like a rhinoceros. But obviously, when you're telling that to your men to hype them up to go into battle, you know what I mean? You described a rhinoceros as like 50 foot tall. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I think in terms of kind of like framing it as like this hype story about like, you know, a retelling of their king passing away and in the midst of battle, it perfectly demonstrates this idea that like all that we see may not be as it is. It's just the way that it's framed,
right?
From the perspective of the Spartans, right?
Yeah.
One thing I will say, however, is that it is. I understand what the framing device was attempting to do, but I would argue that it's just not enough. Like, whether or not wherever you want to place blame is up to you. But the simple truth is, I don't think this type of like framing device is enough to get people to understand that the point of the film is a criticism of this ideology, right? There are a lot of other things that go into to like, you know, kind of criticizing a system that need to be taken into account. When you have a story that's kind of built from the ground up as like hyping up the Spartans and making them seem as if they are almost like larger than life heroes, heroic in every way. When you have this type of story, you have to be really, really, really proactive in how you end up criticizing that culture and that story. And I don't think the framing device is effective enough, and clearly it isn't, right? A lot of people misinterpret the point of the film.
I mean, people do, but I feel like in my viewing experience, you know, I got from it what I got from it. Yeah, I mean, and that is the criticism of the Spartan way. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And
there are pieces of the puzzle that I can utilize to kind of like fit that idea. I agree.
Yeah.
I think there are things that kind of bolster this idea that the point is that the Spartans are a flawed society like any other. And that at the end of the day, their retelling of these events may not have been accurate. That there might have been a lot of stuff left out.
Embellishments.
Yes, exactly. And all of that is true. However, I don't think it's without a critical eye, watching from like a surface level, this film almost seems like an endorsement, even though it's almost antithetical to that idea.
See, I would, I mean, I guess it's just a way that like I took in the movie, and I just feel like on a story level, it's kind of like in Game of Thrones, right? The actions lead to consequences, right?
Mm-hmm.
And every sort of decision that you're criticizing, embellishment or not, is always criticized. You know what I mean? In terms of like the Spartan society, you have a society that like if the baby is not of like purest standards, they will throw it off a cliff.
Mm-hmm.
And as a result, there is a child who comes from that and is the undoing of said king. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And moments like that, even to the point where, it wasn't Leonidas himself who would have thrown that baby. You know what I mean? But he is the one who he then comes to with a chance to redeem himself. You know what I mean?
Right.
And it is Leonidas who turns him away. And that is the undoing of his entire 300 men. You know what I mean?
Yes.
It is those sort of things where on a story level that is just constantly in the movie that always keeps me with me. And another thing too is something that like is from my point of view as an audience member when it comes to like knowing stuff about directors, right?
Mm-hmm.
I feel like the viewing experience of me is going to be a lot different for other people who don't know the background of the movie, and that's fair. I would not criticize people who don't know the background of certain movies for not having the same view. Let's say, for instance, do you know who Woody Allen is?
It rings a bell, but you're gonna have to refresh.
What? Resounding no when anyone hears Woody Allen's name. But Bill Cosby, Harvey Weinstein, this guy has a lot of Oscars, a lot of very acclaimed movies, and if you just watch his movies, you would not be amiss to say how great they are. You know what I mean?
Right.
That being said, when you watch these movies knowing that he molested his daughter and then married his other daughter, you know what I mean?
Okay.
And then you watch his movie, you're gonna have a very different experience. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's like watching Michael Bay movies, right?
Right. Yeah, you can't look at that scene of him filming Megan Fox and not think about the behind the scenes.
Yeah.
And the same goes for Zack Snyder, right? With as much as I know about this director, and then I see what he's doing. You know what I mean?
It's hard to separate what you know about the person from what the film presents, because everything is through this kind of like almost, not to demean or anything, but it's kind of through like these rose tinted glasses of like, I see the version of this that was most likely intended.
Right. I see I see the movie that was intended with all the information I have backing that up. You know what I mean? It's just a matter of perspective and worldview, and those who don't have as much background information would not be amiss to like see maybe it's just an endorsement. If for one they don't look into the story of like, and they see like, you know, everything that Spartan society dictates leads to failure, and if that's not a condemnation, I don't know what is. You know what I mean? Along with the background information.
So the point that I would push against is I think that's definitely true in the case of the man that they push aside, that Leonidas in particular pushes aside, as the air quotes weakest link of their army, right? I think that kind of comes full circle in a really satisfying way in terms of criticizing the Spartan army. However, the part that I'll push back against is that not every aspect of Spartan culture is given that same level of like scrutiny. So you have, and this is where again the framing device kind of does the legwork for it. So you like, for instance, you have an army of 300 men, and from the perspective of like this army, if each and every one of them is truly like, you know, part of that chain, one could argue that the whole point of like their Spartan society functions because it's so brutal, because it's so strict, right? That's kind of the idea of like the Spartans, that they are as strict and rigid as they are.
But they're doomed for failure, though. You know what I mean?
But they're only doomed for failure because of another issue, not because of. See, the problem is there's this underlying idea that kind of rigidness, that kind of unrelenting like harshness of that society would be good if only for very particular circumstances in which it fails, and that being in this case the man that is shunned away. But the reality is that the type of training that the Spartans implement is actually less effective than a more like subdued training, one that understands like the limitations of men and kind of pushes like in essentially.
Wait.
Yeah.
I immediately have to push back on that because the rigid nature of what you're describing is what leads Leonidas and his entire 300 to remain for the final battle. And the non-rigid combatantness is the same as the Arcadians, who leave before the final battle, and yet it is they who survive. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I would say that it's their...
But it's not them that inspire an army of 10,000.
Yes, but that 10,000 is also still going up against a larger army, which is again doomed to fail. It's a cycle that repeats itself.
Well,
this movie is just the beginning and the
hard.
end and the beginning of the
Sure.
circle.
Sure, even if I were to accept that that's the case, that isn't for certain. That 10,000 army of Spartans leading like what 30,000 men, I think it was, they're up against some essentially like almost equal force, and if they
No, I would completely disagree. They even said at the end of the movie that there's still way more way more Persians. But like, oh, that's good odds for Spartans. No.
Oh yeah. They said like what 3-1. They still have numbers 3-1.
Yeah. So no,
but like
it's
it's still. So okay, so if the argument is going to be then that war, that 3-1, that their stories of Leonidas were so hyped up that the idea is that they're literally going to go out there with 10,000 or 40,000 strong and still die anyway, then I could see that.
Yeah, and here's the thing: the movie it's a very Zack Snyder always has these movies that like leave on. You know what I mean? Like Superman being dead at the end of BVS. You know what I mean?
Right.
Or Nolan with Inception. This movie or Snyder again with Watchmen. It leaves it to where one person, and many people have, when you see sequels to the Watchmen, have interpreted. Do people believe the journal? Do people not believe the journal? And it's a really great conversation. And I think a conversation where the Spartans win that fight or they don't win that fight is a great conversation. But the way I see it and I interpret it through the story that I just watched is definitely that it is a failing cycle, which is the reason why something that is a historical piece, as inaccurate and heightened as it is, we don't see Spartans today, and I think it's because they fucking died out doing this shit. You know what I mean?
I could see that. I can see an argument for the idea of like the whole framing device is a cycle of just continual like what's the word for it? It's almost cruel irony. There's a line from the eye patch man whose name I will never remember.
Delios.
Delios.
It's such a good name.
It is a good name.
Yeah.
I just don't remember names. I'm terrible with them. But Delios, he says that hubris is what brought down the immortals. Ironically, that's actually what's going to bring down the Spartans from this.
Yeah. Exactly.
I could take that interpretation. I think I would argue that there's still other. So one thing that I want to ask, because something that I've been thinking about ever since the movie came to an end a few short minutes ago.
Yes.
What is the line, "I hope you live on," from Leonidas mean when he says it to...
That is the greatest fuck you in cinematic history. As we've seen throughout this movie, the Spartan way is a good death is its own reward. You know what I mean? And to the point where you can have that mentality and be like from Man of Steel, right? And not fetishize it, right? You could just respect the enemy, right? But that is not what we see in the 300. And that's why, as someone who's seen more of Zack Snyder's work, you can tell when he is condemning something, when he's not, right? The way it's portrayed in Man of Steel, between two, like,
Yeah, with Feora and... I mean, his name is Elliot in SVU, so I'll call him that. Elliot from
all right.
SVU.
Jim Gordon from Harlequin.
Mm-hmm.
The way it's portrayed there compared to here, where you see an almost rabid, fetishistic Magneto who just like wants to die. Like he's getting fucking hard off of the idea of like, oh my god, I will die tomorrow. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
That's the difference. And going to the end for your question about the final line, he says, I hope you live a long life. I hope you live forever,
Mm-hmm.
which is the worst thing a Spartan could ever hear.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's the idea that you will never have that glorious death. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And what's so sad is because of that, Spartan like lineage, growing up with his dad, he still looks up to it, and that's why he fucking cries, because it's like, fuck, you know what I mean?
Huh. That's interesting. When I heard that line, I don't necessarily disagree with you. When I heard that line, what I thought of was it's supposed to come. It was coming like full circle, basically. Leonidas was like seeing like what he had, essentially how he had fucked up. Like it was like I saw it as kind of his character coming to a close on this moment of like, I shunned you, and now I hope you live on, because I won't be, right, as like this kind of like and that's what makes him break down. It's not so much the idea that that like he's damning him to a long life. It's that he's basically giving him the reassurance that that he's worthy of that life.
That's interesting. Polar opposite.
Yeah, essentially a polar opposite.
Yeah. But I think that's what's great about film discussion. You know what I mean? It'd be fucking boring if two guys watch the same movie and then we're like, yeah, that's great, and then walk away.
Yeah.
This is a really interesting moment where I walk away from it, where it's just like, I feel like the arc of Leonidas' character is compounded at that moment after that, where it is he breaks, because the entire movie he's like a fucking stone. You know what I mean? Even when everyone else is like party rock because of the ships being taken by the storm, he's like still fucking Spartan strong. And
even after the first day at battle, he still stays strong and rigid.
And it's not until his final moment of life where he's able to finally break that and like profess his like love for his wife. Right. And I love that moment because it's my queen, which he has said throughout the entire movie. My queen, my queen,
my wife, my love.
Yeah, it breaks to my wife, and then finally my love. And within the society that they're in, you couldn't ask for a better scene to express that with his wife. You know what I mean? Because he will never come back, not unless on a shield. So in turn, he gives that back to his wife through Delios. You know what I mean? Fucking phenomenal.
Yeah, I think that in those moments, I think I prefer the version of Leonidas that has, in those final moments, kind of come to a almost like to a realization, kind of, about like all of the pride sinks away, and now all that's left is a man at his end, and the last thing he cares about is his wife and the love. It's the emotion that comes out
on the same page. Absolutely.
That he's pushed away for so long.
Yeah.
That he's hidden for so long. I wish that more stories were willing to take it to that place, to a place of like showing where, in those final moments that facade breaks and like the emotion is allowed to come out.
What do you mean in more stories?
Well, like, okay, for instance, let's say like there are like stories about men like Leonidas.
Oh, okay.
I wish more stories were willing to take it to a place of showing the vulnerability, showing that emotion.
Yeah.
If you look at like something like Hamilton, right?
Yeah.
Hamilton in his final moments, in that right before the bullet hits him, it's kind of interesting the way that it's kind of framed. He tries to let out every word that he possibly can, and his wife is almost an afterthought. And I think that's kind of interesting, and it's showing you just the type of person that Hamilton was.
Yeah, for sure.
See, because he like taught, but like with Leonidas, it's almost it's kind of the same thing. It's kind of like it's almost hollow to, in your final moments, finally like break down and like have these emotions. Yet it's also at the same time like it's all he can do. You know, it's like
and like his wife knows that. You know what I mean? It's the same code her life is. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I feel like that is why even before that, he sends that message to her. You know what I mean? But he himself still suppresses that emotion, that feeling, until he's at his last moment, and then everything just comes out. And definitely this actor's best performance. You see it all in his eyes. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's permanently on his face when he dies. You know what I mean? And we've talked a solid 20 minutes on the context of the movie, the messaging of the movie.
Yeah.
We have not touched what this fucking movie is known for, Jesus. The fucking visuals.
I'm gonna let you finish, but I got a lot more to say.
All right,
so we're gonna chill.
Okay.
I'll let you get to the part where we're both going to agree after we have our disagreement, because we have more to cover.
We just agreed on the wife.
Get out of here.
Okay.